Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities of Music, and we are two guys who really enjoy music, live in Iowa, and decide to turn on a camera once a week for you guys for at least an hour, hour and a half, for about 4 reviews. For our first review today, we don't review enough hip-hop, Tom.
No.
We are so ingrained in indie music, indie rock music. There's so much of it. Everybody and their mom are making indie rock albums.
Yeah.
I really do feel that way, right? And I blame the Neutral Milk Hotel.
you could do that. Sure.
I
don't know if Jeff Mangum's mom is on an album anywhere, but she could be.
I'm sure, and she would be a huge sensation.
Yep, she
Anyways,
sure would.
let's get into hip hop now.
All right.
I don't just want to review just regular run-of-the-mill, everyday hip hop. I want to do
no T-Pain.
No T-Pain. I'm a little over Chingy. Just to be honest, I'm just not really into Chingy.
I'm still not getting over Chingy. You know?
Yeah, you're a big Chingy fan.
Oh, yeah,
right. So today, Sadistik. How about we review Sadistik's new album, Ultraviolet? I think this is his 4th record. He had a really big release a couple of years ago that got him a lot of cred, although he's still, I would say, a very underground hip-hop artist who focuses more, I would say, this is alternative hip-hop. I would say whenever you hear the term alternative hip-hop, but first of all, Tom and I hate genres. Music at this point, it's all an amalgamation of so many. Yes, there might be one dominant genre, but trying to put things into boxes anymore is just
difficult.
A futile endeavor, if you ask me. So, progressive hip hop, this is slightly experimental, and I would say mostly that you hear that experimentation in the production effects. And when I say that, I'm talking more in the actual songwriting. There's actually melody in most of these songs. Most of it's comprised of some sort of beat, whether that be like a drum machine beat that's usually pretty solid and driving. And then also you have bass included, and then a lot of, whether it's a lot of electronic elements from synthesizers to keyboards to even just, you know, computer-made electronic melodies that are inserted into the mix. And then Sadistik, in his unique rap style, which isn't really all that unique, it's actually become more popular in the recent years. He has kind of a slower delivery style, and he focuses on intricate wordplay. Tom, Ultraviolet, how did this affect you? Like, what was your thoughts about the confrontation with this album?
First off, it's a hip-hop album that focuses on mood. That's something that we don't hear a whole lot here.
It really does.
You mentioned Ghost Poet as an artist that definitely does that.
And I would say the closest thing I would compare this to.
And I would say Sadistik, you know, while is obviously, you know, different in terms of instrumental and vocal style, it still reaches kind of the same conclusion in terms of mood and just what he's trying to accomplish. And there were a lot of things that I really liked about this album, so I'll just go ahead and dive into that if that's all right. So the guy, first off, you mentioned, you know, just a knack for wordplay and lyricism, and I think he's got that nailed. He fits a lot of really nice kind of moral messages, things that make you think, into his lyrics. One thing that I, of course, like, being the literature geek that I am, he fits in a lot of literary references. You hear a lot of authors come up in here and classic literary works. I think those are kind of cool. You know, it doesn't inherently make music better just to show that you have those kinds of smarts, but highbrow lyricism. It is, and if you can make a good comparison with it can make the lyrics more potent, is the way I would say it, because you can fit a lot more meaning with a reference like that rather than having to spell it out.
One thing that we talk about all the time on our channel is an artist providing a sense of warmth, or some way that the listener is relating to the music, and lyrics are a great way to do that, especially in a hip-hop record. It's not about going to the club.
No, it's not about, we are never in the club, and I love that.
Never in the club.
I don't like going to clubs, people. I don't want to when I'm listening to music. I don't want to on a Friday night. I'd rather just, you know, focus in and see what the guy has to say. So there's that aspect of it I definitely do really like. Another thing that I really appreciated is he really mixes up song structures a lot. He really, you know, there's cool intros on tracks. A few that I would pick out for that is the closing track, The Rabbit Hole, does that a bit. Also track 4, Into the Night. It's kind of nice. You have these kind of meandering ambient sounds, and then all of a sudden the song kicks in, and it might even be halfway through the track. You didn't even know if he was going to end up rapping on that track.
You thought it was going to be an instrumental, and then all of a sudden the song
develops. There's a bit of that, exactly. And then a song just comes out of nowhere. He hits you maybe with a couple of verses, and then leaves it be for that track and moves on. I think that's a cool approach to hip-hop, is not trying to pack too much into any one song, but also letting the instrumentals play their part. Take the focus off of the vocals for a second and let everything else you have to offer shine.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, one thing that this album does do very strongly, I think, is provide a number of tracks that just showcase Sadistik's strengths. The first being, I think, 1984, a mutual track pick of ours, track 2 on the album. So you have a good album intro with Cult Leader. It's a very short song, only 2 minutes long, and then you get into 1984, which has a nice beat, lots of big electronic bass, but the real point about that whole song is the chorus and that catchy chorus. This is probably one of the least progressive or experimental songs on this record, but it just sets a good mood and a good chorus that gets it in your head, and you really just find yourself singing along to it. There's a number of tracks that follow. Chemical Burns, another really aggressive delivery track, big beat. One of your track picks, Tom. Then a very experimental track with Into the Night, which has that intro you were talking about, and those on a number of spots here, whether it's an intro, an outro, or just a moment during the track where Sadistik is providing some sort of ambient transitional part, really adds to the whole album listening experience of Ultraviolet. And that's something that's really important to us, is because we don't want to just hear a compilation of singles. We want artists to take the time to craft an album listen, something that ranges from 30 to 190 minutes if you're a Swans album, and really something that's listenable. And so he's doing that built in. Now, where I think that the album starts to lose some of its focus, you have tracks like Cubic Zirconia, which neither of us picked, although it's a track when I'm listening to it, I always identified with what he was doing lyrically on that track, but I don't think that the songwriting is all that solid. There's just not enough melody there.
I totally agree.
There's a number of other tracks on the back half of this record that just weren't up to the par that was set on the first third of this record. And now there's a couple exceptions. I think that he shows great versatility in the track Nowhere. That has an old school vibe to it. It's a huge beat. It sounds very West Coast to me. And I thought that was a huge strong. And then Tom, you and I both picked Death Warrant track 11.
That was a great track.
Great track, just another track with just really good melody and chorus. He ends the album well with that experimental track, The Rabbit Hole, but there's several tracks in there that we skipped around that just aren't at the same quality level.
Yeah, I agree, and that's one of my big gripes about this album. I'll come out and say I liked this album overall. I thought it was good. I definitely enjoyed it, and it grew on me from first listen, for sure. But one thing that I never really got over was just not only that track displacement, but I felt like it was kind of a case of, tracks kind of accomplishing the same thing. One thing I noticed I gravitated towards, and it's reflected in my track picks, I picked track 3, Chemical Burns, I picked track 11, Death Warrant. Those were two of the only tracks to me that really upped the tempo and upped that aggressive delivery.
Now, Death Warrant had a guest spot that was just killer.
Yeah, and they were very good. Yes. And that helped as well. But even Sadistik's part in that was he brought the intensity up from a bit from the others. Because I felt like once I started to get into this album, I was like, okay, these are a lot of down-tempo songs where he has a very even pace. He never really raps too quickly. The tempo wasn't too fast. Nothing was, the intensity level was maybe around a 5 or a 6. And so once he picked that up, that's when it really got my attention. So even some of the more experimental tracks, like you said, there was a perfect example, Cubic Zirconia. That was an album, that was a song that I wasn't into quite as much, because while I appreciated the experimentalism of it, it didn't really make a statement enough different from the rest. I felt the same way about track 12, Gummo, track 9, Still Awake.
I really felt about Still Awake.
Yeah, and on a 55-minute album, I felt like that was a bit of a hit against it. I would have liked to see more of the variety, because when that came in there, it really grabbed my attention. The other thing that I didn't like quite as much about this is just at times, while I love the kind of sprawling structures and ambience of it, every now and then I'd get some production and some sounds that sounded a little cheap to me, I gotta say. Some of the synths sounded kind of wonky, and for me, that loses some of that professionalism and mystique that really makes albums like this, that should make albums like this, very, very potent.
What would you give this?
I'm going to give this a 72.
Okay, I think I like this one quite a bit more than you, just from the standpoint that I really enjoyed the sprawling structures, and at times, while I do agree, probably not to the same extreme that, as you mentioned, I do agree that he could have trimmed this down to a more sizable listen. I think it would have felt a bit more focused. I also wasn't affected by the production at all. I actually thought that the production on this was pretty solid, but quite honestly, that is your forte and not mine, so I'll take your word for it. Man. I'm going to go 79. 79 on this.
All right.
Okay, so that makes this a 76 from Velocities in Music. And if you guys at all follow our scores, it's not like we're grading papers in college or anything like that. Our average is somewhere around 77, 78, so this would be slightly below that, but it's still overall a pretty high quality record that we would recommend to you. Not a lot of things terribly bad with it that we would recommend or advise you to avoid this record. So go out, listen to Ultraviolet, let us know what you thought of this whole atmospheric hip-hop take that Sadistik is providing, and let us know what your thoughts were at www.velocitiesinmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesinmusic. Now, as always, please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let Tom or I know if there's any records that you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.